Welcome to video 4 of chapter 5, and we will look at risks to the newborn's health and well-being. And certainly one risk is premature birth. This is a birth that occurs before a gestational age of 37 weeks. There are many possible causes for prematurity. One would be multiple births, so the woman having twins or triplets, for instance, may cause premature births. If there are some unhealthy maternal behaviors, such as smoking or drinking or drug use, this could lead to prematurity. The mother being either obese or underweight can also lead to prematurity. If the mother has an untreated medical condition, such as high blood pressure or diabetes, and also if there is an abnormality in the woman's reproduction system. So, for instance, premature separation of the placenta would lead to the baby having to be delivered early. If the cervix opens up too soon, it can lead to an early delivery. So there are many possible causes of prematurity. Low birth weight is another risk. This is when a full-term newborn weighs less than 5 pounds and 8 ounces. Some, as it says here, some premature and low birth weight infants develop normally, but these infants are at a higher risk for developmental problems, and they are also more vulnerable to infections. One other risk of prematurity is what's called prematurity stereotype. And this is when the parents or caregivers have a stereotypical negative view of a premature infant that results in the parents or caregivers lowering their expectations for the child, and because it was born premature. So this prematurity stereotype may last for months, or it may last even for years, where the parents always kind of treat the child as if they are somewhat fragile, or I don't know, that because they were born premature, and they probably had an extended hospital stay, and so even as the child gets better and recovers from this negative start, I mean, often parents will hold to the idea that this child is somewhat fragile, and so they won't have the same expectations of a child that was born at full term. And this prematurity stereotype, I mean, in some cases it could last all through childhood, or in some cases even lifelong, where the parents always kind of have this viewpoint that this child, that they can't expect as much from this child. Okay, let's go on and look at infant mortality. This is a measure of the number of infants who die in the first year of life. And you can see that the United States is up at the top of the list for the infant mortality rate compared to similar countries that have similar economic well-being. Whenever I see something like this, I kind of picture a bunch of Americans chanting, "We're number one, we're number one." Well, obviously it's not good in this case. It should seem to be a somewhat surprising result, because we really are known for being a medically advanced country, we have very good procedures and doctors available and hospitals, and yet we have more infants dying during the first year than all the other countries listed here. Um, there's a couple of reasons for this. You could, you know, you should be able to think of what might be causing more infant deaths. I'll give you just a couple of major reasons, and I'm sure there's others as well, but one is definitely a lack of a government subsidized healthcare system, um, where you know where everyone can receive medical attention without cost. Um, I mean, I say without cost. Obviously, everything has to be paid for, but it's done through taxation, and so you never pay money for any particular visit. So in a country such as Canada, where I'm from, you never think twice about going to see a doctor, especially if you have a sick infant, because there's no copay, there's no extra charge if they need, more advanced medical treatment. And we know that here in the United States, oftentimes our insurance doesn't cover everything. People go broke sometimes with expensive medical conditions, and so people um, of lower income status often really think twice about going to the doctor, and so with a sick infant, they may put it off. Let's see if it just gets better on its own, so we don't have to pay money. Um, and so this is one of the reasons, certainly, that we have higher infant death rate. People are not doing preventative maintenance, where you take children in just in case they it might not be anything serious. Maybe they just have a cold, but you can you can take infants in or go in yourself or whatever in these other countries without it costing you anything at that time. So um, people are much more readily they're much more ready to go to a doctor with an infant that is showing some kind of um, negative symptoms. Anyway, so that's one reason: no standardized healthcare system. And a second major reason is our horrible um, uh, what's it called? Sorry, our horrible parental leave um, policies, and we are one of the only advanced countries in the world that that does not guarantee um, uh, new mothers paid time off of work. And so, because um, we don't have any guarantees of receiving money when you're off work, delivering a baby and caring for a newborn, mothers are often rushing back to work because they can't afford to lose any more income. The average stay at home following birth is only 6 weeks for U.S. mothers, which every expert considers far too low. Um, in all these other countries listed here, they have better parental leave policies, and 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 so mothers are encouraged to spend longer at home with their newborns. And you cannot beat the care of a parent looking after a newborn, for months or years or even years in some cases after they're born, rather than having your newborn cared for by daycares or babysitters or things like that. it is certainly one of the factors that leads to a higher infant mortality rate. There's no better care than a loving parent to stay with a newborn. I was lucky; I was able to stay at home for the first year of my daughter's life, and I didn't work, and we had enough money that I could do that. So I mean, most people or many people do not in those circumstances, and they're forced to go back to return to work. Okay, well, those are a couple of reasons that we top the charts for infant mortality rate. And okay, let me go on here. Okay, there's an interesting section in your book that looks at kind of the progression of neonatal intensive care units, and you can see this this picture this is from the 1880s. It was known as a child hatchery, and it was basically one of the first incubators that existed. Now, obviously, we have extremely advanced incubators. They're really incredible, particularly the intensive care units for babies in need. I mean, they provide like everything that an infant needs to do well at the beginning of life, and really amazing. Apparently, the technology of the intensive care units that we have now available. Maybe read about that on your own. I'm not going to go through everything that's in the textbook, but it's an interesting section to read. Next, we have SIDS, or sudden infant death syndrome. This is the unexpected death of an apparently healthy infant. The babies put the infant down to sleep for the night. They wake up the next morning, and the infant, in the case of SIDS, the infant has died without there being necessarily any obvious cause. This is the leading cause of death for children between the ages of 1 month and 1 year. And the reason it's not from 0 to 1 year is that there are many infant deaths within the first month of life. Some babies are just born with genetic abnormalities where they may not survive, more than days or weeks, and some babies are born with certain diseases that will kill them within days or weeks, and there is a somewhat high rate of infants that die quickly due to genetics or biological issues. So anyways, but beginning at 1 month and up to 1 year, SIDS is the number one cause of death. The greatest risk is between 1 month and 4 months of age. SIDS is caused by a combination of factors, and some of the things that contribute to SIDS deaths. One thing could be a physical vulnerability in the infant. So maybe the infant has an abnormality in the part of the brain that controls breathing. They might have a brain chemical imbalance that leads to SIDS. They might have some kind of bacterial infection. So sometimes there's some biological vulnerabilities that exist within an infant that leads to SIDS. There may be environmental stressors that contribute to SIDS. One of the key ones is secondhand smoke. It's hard to believe that in this day and age there are still parents that smoke in a house with a newborn, exposing the newborn to secondhand smoke. It certainly increases the risks of SIDS greatly. Overheating is another possible cause, and this is with putting too many or too warm of clothes on the baby, or overheating the baby's room. And you might, it's kind of obvious why parents might do this. You got a little newborn, like they seem, helpless and fragile, and so you want to keep them warm, and so you put the heat up a little higher in the infant's room, or you put like, really thick sleepwear on the infant. This is not good for them. The rule of thumb is the infant can withstand the same conditions that are comfortable for you. So if you're, if whatever temperature you've got your room set at, I mean, the infant should basically have the same temperature set in their room. If you're sleeping in a t-shirt and underwear, let's say, there's no sense putting some kind of big parka, put PJs on the infant. They could sleep in the same kind of sleepwear that you do. I mean, like, so the rule of thumb is like, if you're comfortable, the infant's comfortable. You don't have to go to extreme lengths to try to keep them warm. Another possibility is too much bedding, or having a pillow that the baby's sleeping on. These things are not really needed. Once again, too much bedding may be an attempt to keep the baby warm. A baby should have no more than a very thin, a real thin sheet or a thin blanket. Babies do not need pillows. Some cribs have, kind of built-in pillows that are kind of stuck to the crib, so they can't be moved, and those are a little bit better than a loose pillow. But a baby is perfectly fine sleeping on a flat surface. I mean, we're so used to pillows as adults that we automatically want to give a pillow to our infant, but they really have no need of one. They're perfectly happy on a flat surface without any pillows. Another thing that increases at least the risk of SIDS is putting the baby to sleep on their stomachs. And this makes it more likely that they could experience SIDS. When this was discovered, there was a major educational campaign that was launched entitled, Back to Sleep. And it was all about teaching parents and society that babies should be sleeping on their backs in order to reduce the likelihood of SIDS. So there was I believe this was back in the 90s, the big advertising campaign, and there were commercials and advertisements, and back to sleep, telling parents to put their babies on their backs. Something that goes along with that is that what you want to make sure is that during the day you give them some tummy time. If you're observing them, or if they're in an active, awake state, I mean, it's good to put them on their stomachs, during the afternoon or during playtime, or it's going to increase the likelihood of them crawling sooner, which is going to open up more experiences for them. So you don't want your baby to never be on their stomach. You just don't want to do it at night when they're sleeping. Okay, so those are kind of the major factors involved in SIDS. And finally, we have abusive head trauma and shaken baby syndrome. Obviously, a terrible situation when this occurs. So if a baby is vigorously shook, it can cause bruising, bleeding, or swelling in the brain that can result in permanent brain damage or even death. Um, Apparently, I've heard that there babies have been seen um, in hospitals where they've had blood coming out of their eye sockets or their ears because after being shaken. Um, the problem is that the baby's brain is not as firmly set as an adult's brain. I mean, I can shake my head vigorously right now. I'm doing it. I know you can't see me, but I'm shaking my head vigorously, and my brain's okay. I've got some, I've got good cushioning liquid in there that, so it's not bouncing around. But babies' brains are not quite as well protected. And when you shake a baby vigorously, which you should never ever do, um, anyways, when you shake a baby vigorously, the brain kind of bounces around inside the skull, and which is what causes the bruising and bleeding and swelling. It is the impact of the brain hitting the inside of the skull. Incidence is highest between 2 to 3 months of age. Think for a second why this could be. What would cause babies to be shaken in the first place? And I'll tell you the answer if you maybe you've guessed it already, but this is when crying is at its peak, 2 to 3 months of age. And this is why most babies are shook in the first place. It's because of their excessive, what's considered excessive crying, and somehow some parent thinks that shaking them will get them to stop crying. Okay. I know I don't need to say this. Don't ever shake a baby. Okay, this concludes video 4 of chapter 5.